is Joanna Salinas. I am the outreach coordinator with the Waukesha County Green Team. If you're unfamiliar with us, we are a nonprofit here in Waukesha County. We've been here for about, I think we're going into our 11th year now, which is exciting. And our main mission is education of environmental and sustainability topics in the county. So we do that through a lot of education, and we also partner with groups. I'm just going to admit a few more people here. So we partner with schools, municipalities, residents, businesses, all sorts of organizations on different projects they're working on. And we also do a whole lot of education for residents of our community, and we have started a virtual series called the One Simple Act virtual series, because one simple act can often make a huge difference and impact. So we're excited to host this series of virtual topics, and tonight we are excited to welcome our permaculture and gardening group here tonight. And Carolyn and Rich are going to teach us all about growing garlic, which is awesome. Our permaculture and gardening group is a group of Waukesha County residents who work with the Waukesha County Green Team and specifically focus on gardening and permaculture topics. So without any further ado, I'm going to welcome Carolyn, and just real quick how this presentation is going to work tonight is Carolyn and Rich are going to present for about 25 minutes or so, and then they will be open to a host of questions. All right, Carolyn, hi.
Okay, thank you. And welcome everybody. We're really very excited tonight. We get to go to Rich's garden, and it's going to be a wonderful experience. And he's going to teach you how to grow an abundant crop of garlic. The exciting thing for me is that I followed everything, you can't really see this, but I followed everything he suggested. And my garlic is amazing this year. And so I'm extremely thankful to him, and I'm thankful that he is willing to share his insights with all of you. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Really pick his brain. He is amazing. So before we begin, here's a sneak peek of his garden. When I was there at his home, it was like we were in this beautiful paradise. So beautiful. He's a teacher and a very accomplished artist. And when I saw his garden, I felt as though his artistic talents extended from his home and his studio into his garden. Growing garlic is really a rewarding adventure, since many pests don't target it, and it even has a reputation for repelling rabbits and moles.
And vampires.
Yes, yes. So I'm going to let Rich take over now, and he's going to reveal his soil building techniques and his secret that's hidden under this pile of snow.
Hi there. I'm a recruit to this, and I'm actually an old dinosaur. I am pretty old. I quit teaching public school about 20 years ago, and I've been gardening for close to 50 years and learned by experience mostly. I adhere to something called phenology, which is paying attention to Mother Nature. When the lilacs are starting to bud out, that's time to plant peas. That's the idea anyway. So quite a while ago, I discovered that I really don't like to bend over and pull weeds. I hate that, and I'm getting older, and so I figured out a way to do it better. What you see in the center of this screen, way back here, Carolyn's kind of waving the cursor around back there, that pile underneath the snow right now is about 3 feet high. But when I first placed that pile of leaves in the fall of last year, when I placed that pile of leaves there, it was over 6 feet high. And through Mother Nature, raining and snowing, all of that weight of the snow just went boom, crushed that stuff down. Made a marvelous place for mice to hide, and they don't last because I cultivate snakes and other critters around here. The mice never last, they never stay, and the mulch that I'm preparing from last year is nothing more than leaves from last year. The larger the leaf, the better. If you have leaves off of a plum tree or a cherry tree, they're pretty small. They will work, but you have to use twice as many as oak leaves and maple leaves. Box elder leaves are okay, but they're not quite as good as maple and oak leaves. So if you know anybody that has maple or oak trees, ask them for a bunch of leaves in barrels, black plastic bags, any way you can get them, because they perform a wonderful service for your dirt, no matter how big your garden is. Mine is about 50 by 50 feet, and I grow an awful lot of stuff out of there. My wife keeps telling me you grow too much stuff. So we give things away here and there. Off on the center left side, you can even see an old Brussels sprout, a little lower there, right there. That's an old Brussels sprout that I never got to picking all of the Brussels sprouts before the winter freeze came. And way in the back there in the middle, you see that square frame? That square frame is where I'm going to be planting garlic. So if we go to the next slide or the next thing, you can see the springtime dirt that I have here. Now this is where I got onions planted, but the thing I want you to really understand is that look at the dirt. How many weeds do you see? By the time I've planted the onions, I should have weeds all over the place, and I don't. What you do see is a lot of leaf litter. Those are leaves from last year. I let them go. There's no sense in turning them in. They just turn to dirt all on their own, just like the forest floor. The forest floor has got all kinds of dirt because the leaves are never turned in. They just sort of mulch themselves. So growing onions is a different story, but this is how I, next one, please. Yeah, if you stuff all kinds of leaves in between your garlic, when your garlic is planted in a particular manner that's coming up, a fist and a thumb apart and a fist deep, just place a whole bunch of leaves wherever you can get to that dirt with leaves. I have a personal preference for them because weeds don't grow out of that stuff. It forms like a carpet, a real thick mass of carpet. How deep? Glad you asked. Probably about 3 to 6 inches, depending on how many leaves that I've saved from the previous year. And if you haven't tested your soil yet, if you're curious, the UW extension gives you kits where you can put in some soil that's been dried and bring it back to them, or mail it into the UW extension in Madison. They'll send you a report on your pH and whatever your soil needs for fertility. I do that every 2 years because I've lived here for about 24 years. And I've put so much stuff into the garden, horse manure, compost, leaf litter, all kinds of stuff. My humus level is just wonderful. And so when you stick your hand in the wet soil and squeeze it, you just get a ball of beautiful, beautiful black dirt. So with that soil test you can get from Madison, if you need to amend your soil, they will tell you on that soil report how to get a pH between 6 or 7, or even up to 7.5 back down to 7. When you're planting garlic though, it likes the sun. So try to pick a spot where the sun is going to be around for most of the summer. If you get a little shade in the fall, it's not a big deal. When you plant the garlic, that's pretty critical because you plant it in about 2 or 3 weeks from now. You plant it now in the soil and throw a whole bunch of leaf litter over the top of it so that the soil is prevented from freezing or frosting. And underneath those leaves, your garlic cloves will grow all winter long. They will grow and be ready for next year's growth. So right about now, one of the things I do out in the garden, if I've got any weeds that really have come up, I'm going to take my weed burner, a propane tank with a weed burner, and just burn the crap out of the soil. That way, if there's any seeds there, I've burned them up. If there's any weeds there, I've burned them up. Now I just sort of drag my rake over the soil to level it, make sure that I've got a real nice place to stick garlic cloves in. And here we go, ready to get it on. In 3 weeks, we're going to put some garlic in the ground. My favorites, and I've tried a bunch. I've probably tried a dozen over my career out here for 24 years. I prefer this Music and Russian varieties because they seem to do the best in my microclimate. I'm at the bottom of a big hill near the Kettle Moraine Forest, and my soil. My soil contains a lot of sand, a tremendous amount of humus, and a little bit of clay. And after so many years of putting things into that soil, it's just black as sin. It's great. So right now, what I'm doing, I haven't done it yet in the garden. I'm going to rake my leaf litter away just a little bit. I'm going to burn the soil, and then I'm going to start breaking up my cloves, my bulbs, from last year's garlic. I harvested them already, and they're dried already, so they're ready to plant again. I'm going to pick my varieties between Music and Russian. If you need a supply of good garlic, don't get it out of the store, the grocery store around here. That garlic is not going to do well for you at all. You have to get it from a place like Fedco or Johnny's or a grower in the area. One of the best in the area that I know of is called Copper Kettle. They have a whole farm, a horse farm that they've turned into nothing but garlic out there. It's a little tough to find. It's up in the, I think in the Manchas area. So you got to look that up and maybe take a trial run out there or go online looking for Copper Kettle. And they come up with a store. The store that they have online is, I don't know about these checkout carts and all of that stuff, but once you start the process online, you'll know whether or not they have any seed. What I'm using for seed is the clove. If they have any left. I know that their prices are fair and they're quick. So if you go to Fedco or Johnny's, that's sending a mail off to the distance. You'll never know when you get that stuff back, but Copper Kettle is close. If you want to get it in the ground this year, I would suggest trying them out. Okay, let's see, where are we? Yep, okay. What's next, Carolyn?
Oh, don't use garlic that you found in your supermarket because you don't know where it came from or what it's been treated with.
Yeah, that's a big thing. I've fed my kids organic stuff ever since they were little, and they're healthy. It's a real big difference. If you want to know the difference between garlic in the store and garlic out of your ground, it's like the difference between green beans off of the vine 10 minutes from the garden and a can of beans that you got at Pick and Save. The taste is amazing. And you know there's no crud in it. There's no preservatives. So here we're going on to different kinds of garlic. There's hardneck and softneck. My two favorites are the hardneck. Softneck, as you can see here, is better for warmer climates. It's probably easier to grow, but you're going to get smaller bulbs from it than smaller cloves. And I find that my garlic, my hardnecks, keep tremendously long in my basement. My basement is about 55 to 60 degrees. Right now it's at 70, but I've already brought my garlic in and it's hanging in the basement. It's nice and dry down there. I've turned my dehumidifier off so that it's not going to suck all the moisture out of the stuff I put down there. The garlic I'm growing, the hardneck, Music and Russian, do very well up in the northern part of the United States. The one thing it does though is put up a pre-flower. And over on the upper right of the screen, you see the low-lying view looking up into the sky. Those curly things are not little monsters, and they're not trying to scare away the vampires, but what they are is a flower that turns into actual garlic cloves. if you cut those things and take a look inside there, you'll see little miniature cloves, but you have to get rid of those while your garlic is growing. If you see those starting to flower like that, cut them off. How much to cut off? I cut them off at about 4 inches below the big bulb that's up there. It's the central stalk of the flower that is actually turning into another garlic bulb. And what that's doing is trying to suck nutrients from the bulb in the ground. So you want to get rid of that. Put the most nutrients into the ground rather than the scape, as it's called, sticking up in the air. And you can use those. We cut them 4 inches below that bulb, start chopping them up, chop, 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 right into stir fry. Or you can freeze them whole and cut them up when you need them. It's okay to do that, but you need to get them off of the garlic plant that's growing so that you're not sucking moisture and nutrients out of the bulb that's developing in the ground. There you can see the difference between soft neck and hard neck ones. And if you research about the difference between soft neck and hard neck, you'll find there's different varieties. One of the things that you can really notice, though, if you look at the top of the soft neck, you can see that there's a little what looks like brown area coming out of the bulb that's in the ground. And I've found that that's prone to rotting. So I don't like the soft neck as much as I like the hard neck. When that hard neck is like a hard branch of a tree or a very stiff branch coming out, if you look on top of the hard neck, right up on the top there, you can see it's pretty fibrous. When that garlic is dried out thoroughly, you can take a branch trimmer and you can cut right through that, and you can see that it's drying out really, really nice. Okay, prep the cloves before planting. Break the garlic bulb apart into its individual cloves. Keep the paper layer on the outer parts of the cloves. Select the largest cloves, plant the best of the best. So after your first year that you've grown garlic, vet the plant. Once you're drying them, you can observe how they're drying. You can check, see which ones are the biggest bulbs that you got. Bite the bullet. Take that biggest bulb. Now you're going to get 6 to 8 cloves for next year's 6 to 8 garlic bulbs. So you increase your harvest tremendously if you can hold back the first year. If you go out someplace and buy 3 or 4 bulbs, you're going to have about 20 plants that you could start for next year, 20 different cloves. So I would use some and I would plant some so that you can get a good idea of what you really like. Some garlic that you buy is hot, and some people like hot garlic. Others aren't so hot. So you need some advice. I don't have much on that. You'd get that online from what garlic is hot, what garlic is cooler, what garlic is most garlicky, what is most like lettuce. You got to make your own choices about that. All what you're hearing from me today is my personal experience, which means nothing to you except how to get it in the ground and grow it right now. You got to pick out the variety that you really like. This is something that I've found in the past. If you throw a handful of cloves in the same hole and don't water or mulch it, you'll get the smallest cloves. If you forget about a plant that you had last year, in the springtime, it'll come up. And that happens because you forget to harvest the bulb that was in the ground. I've come across bulbs that I forgot to harvest. Well, all of those cloves that are right in a real tight bunch like this, now they're making their individual, trying to make their individual big garlic bulbs. Hot tip, you can take that thing out of the ground. If you see them coming up like this, like grass, get your shovel, dig them suckers out and separate them. Now you can put them in different places. Now they're not going to get the biggest bulbs, but you'll get some that are turning out not as good as the ones you planted in the fall, but at least you're not wasting them. A second use is just dig them out of the ground, chop them up and use them right away. So here we get into the how far apart they grow. When we did a presentation at Retzer Nature a year or two ago, Carolyn, I'm not sure. I kept telling people, here's your measurement. This is how far apart they ought to be. And this is how deep they ought to be. So that measures out to be 4 to 5 inches deep and about, depending on your hand and so forth, about 6 to 8 inches apart. And actually, some people say you can plant your rows, if you have a row of garlic, a foot apart. I don't actually follow that because my soil is so fertile. I just use the fist and the thumb apart on the rows as well as apart on the individual cloves in the row. And oh, look at this poor person. Oh, they're bending and they're weeding and they're stirring up the soil. Oh my. In the lower left-hand spot there, you see weeds coming up. You know how to kill those weeds without bending your back over? Throw a whole bunch of leaves on there. Mat them down, crush them in. You won't have to weed. Very simple. You can see that this garlic is about a foot tall already. Yeah. 4 inches deep, fist deep, tip. Yep, you got to plant the flat end down, the point surface up. Yeah, you don't want to plant your garlic too shallow because if your soil does get dried out, depending on your soil again, you don't give the bulb a chance to expand. It needs to have moisture. And so I plant mine at least a fist deep because the lower part of the soil is better for moisture retention, particularly with the mulch on top of that. Doesn't dry out. Sun-baked dirt is not good for garlic. And while it's beginning in the wintertime to grow, the mulch on top also keeps that soil from freezing and breaking off the roots. So the winter growth is really good to make big bulbs in the next coming summer when you harvest them. Moderating temperatures, repeat freezing and thawing are hard on the young roots. You betcha frost heaves, tears the roots, just like other bulbs. If you plant tulips, you don't want to plant them too close to the surface. Freezing and thawing breaks roots, not good for them. Yeah, and I put my soil about 4 to 6 inches deep, or my mulch about 4 inches deep. I prefer leaf mulch over straw because the leaves gets very, very wet in the winter, and in the spring, they act like an organic carpet suppressing the weeds, just like the forest floor. If you go way back to the beginning pictures in this presentation, you can see how many weeds I got in the garden. Hardly any, because I put down a ton of leaves. If I put my seeds in the ground, as soon as they're up, bango, I put leaves down. If I grow my own seeds for tomatoes and plants and stuff, I put the plant in the ground and tuck leaves all around it. Every time I see weeds starting to come up, more leaves right on top of it. I know that a lot of people use straw. The difficulty with straw is it's pencil-like, and you can have a foot of that stuff over your dirt, and there's still going to be a little bit of sunlight that gets through all of that. So there's another reason why I prefer leaves, because they mat, and they don't allow a lot of sunlight to get to your dirt down below. Straw's okay, but don't use wood chips. They are too tough. They take a lot of nitrogen to break down. They'll be great for adding humus to your soil, but it'll take you 2 or 3 years for that stuff to break down. And the same is true with sawdust. Sawdust compacts tremendously. Adding compost from your compost pile, you should do that before you plant garlic, not as a mulch, because there might be some seeds that didn't get heated enough to kill the seeds. There's again another reason why I use leaves, because they mat down, and if there's any seeds like from a maple tree in there, they're real easy to pull out. You'll rarely have them because the roots are searching for dirt. They can't find dirt because there's nothing but leaves there. So there it is. Cloves can start sprouting pretty soon. About a week after you put them in the ground, they're going to break open and start to grow. And if you put mulch over the top of them right away, you might experience some leaf blowing. And so I always put a little bit of chicken wire or something to hold the leaves in place before snow. If it snows right away, well, no problem. The snow will keep the leaves in place. The cloves are going to begin to sprout in about a week after you plant them in the ground. And usually that's about the second week in October when you plant them. So you could get snow and you may not have snow, but don't worry about it because they're going to start to grow. And if you cover them with leaves, they will be continually growing, growing, growing. They might even start to poke their nose up through the leaf mulch because they're pretty strong when they start coming through the ground. If you do see garlic growing through the leaves, pull the leaves up and dump them right over the top of that. You won't kill them. Believe it or not, they'll go all through the winter just like that. And then in the springtime, drag your mulch off, let that garlic start to turn from yellow into a nice green, and then stuff those leaves all the way around them again. Some folks recommend foliar applications of fertilizer up to May 15th. I don't use any of that stuff because my soil is very fertile. And they don't want you to fertilize after May 15th because if you do, you're liable to put more green leaves up than bulb growth in the base underneath the soil. There's some of those garlic scapes in the upper right. Those guys are the precursor to the bulb that's starting to develop in the ground. And so as soon as those things start to grow, you know that that plant is going to be taking its energy from the developing bulb and putting it into a scape. So cut those scapes off and let all that energy the plant's leaves are making build that bulb up in the ground. They're delicious. You can eat them raw out of the garden. I have. There's always something to snack on out there, but they freeze wonderfully, and you don't need them to draw moisture as well as fertility from the bulb that's in the ground. Now we get to harvesting. When to harvest? Oh my. So if you extend your garlic growing, needs about 1 inch of water a week, but that mulch on top of the soil prevents the moisture from evaporating. And so I only water once or twice a season if I really need to. And how do I figure that out? Well, I pull some of the mulch back and I stick my finger right in the soil. If I can't stick my finger in the soil, it's too dry. Put the mulch back, throw the water on for about an hour and quit. You're supposed to have loose enough soil so that bulb can expand, so it can just grow. And the mulch really keeps the garlic expanding. Usually the scapes that you cut off give you a time, 3 weeks from 3 weeks after you cut the scapes off. That's getting to the time where you start to harvest. Now, if you check out this picture of the garlic on the grass, most folks will tell you, excuse me, that you're not supposed to take the dirt off the garlic. Well, I find that that's pretty messy. So I throw all my garlic harvest on the grass and I hose the crap out of them. I just keep washing the dirt off the roots, washing the dirt off the bulb. I'll rotate them over and then I'll let them dry in the sun all the rest of the day. The reason I do that is so that later, much later, after the garlic is starting to dry, I can snip those roots off with the scissors very easily, and it's messless except for the roots that are just falling into a bucket. And you'll see later where I'm hanging them up as well. Another indicator of the harvest is when the leaves at the bottom start browning up and yellowing. And harvesting garlic is kind of tricky. You don't want to let them sit in the ground until your tops are totally gone, because look what can happen. The bulb itself starts to split and it wants to start growing again because it's dried out. They figure, hey, I've dried out. I want to populate the soil again. So you got to figure out when to harvest your garlic appropriately. And when go back to one previously, Carolyn. You see how the leaves are starting to yellow there, but there's still some pretty good green ones up on the top. Back one more. Check out all the green that's on there yet. And look at how big these bulbs are. But if you look at all the whiteness in the bulb and the stem, you can tell how deep the garlic was. And then right above that, you can see all the things that are turning brown and dying off. So when there's about 4 to 5 of those big leaves that are on the growing stem, when about 4 to 5 of those things are drying up and dying, that's it. You're done. Harvest your garlic. But if you're curious about when to do it, use one as an example. Stick a small shovel in the ground, break the garlic you want to check loose, pull it out of the ground. See if you think that that's not this picture. What you don't want to see is the garlic bulb deteriorating. You want to see the thing whole. You want to see the paper on the outside and nice and big. So that's kind of how you judge what to do with the garlic. I even put mine on the cement here before I washed them, and you can see there's still a little bit of dirt on some of those things. But they don't like a lot of sun, but they'll take a little bit more sun to dry out more thoroughly. You can see the top middle sections of the leaves are still green here, but there's a lot of yellow and a lot of browning near the base where the garlic comes out of the ground. As long as I've washed mine off, I want to dry that water off before I hang them up. When I hang them up, the final curing will take place. So a day in the sun is the most I'd ever give it. And there it is, hanging, grouped up in about 6 to 9, maybe 10, all tucked in together. Now you can see that I haven't cut off the tops on any of these. I won't cut the tops off of these maybe until, until I start planting them in October. I just let them dry, let them dry, let them dry. I want to make sure that that hard neck is really hard and tight. I don't want any rot to come down that stem and go back into the bulb down below. Once I've got these things all dry, I'll keep them in that hangman's noose there, that loop, and I'll just go downstairs and hang them up and let them dry. They will last in my garden, or in my basement from the garden all winter. It says here that they'll store for 3 to 6 months. Well, one year when I demonstrated this at Retzer Nature Center, I was giving away extra bulbs from the previous year. When did we have that presentation, Carolyn? Do you remember? Was it in the summer, July?
Yeah, it was July.
Yeah, so that's almost a year. That's like 8 months. It was in my basement and they weren't growing. Here I'm giving away bulbs. Here, go try this, but do it like I told you, this far apart, this deep. And Carolyn had some good results.
Yeah, for sure. I remember.
So there we are. We are open for business and questions. What do you think, Bud?
That was awesome. Thank you so much. We do have a couple questions. There was a lot in the chat sharing different places to get garlic, but one of the questions we had was back to your comment on soil samples for testing. Is there a time of year that it's better to do that?
Yeah, now.
Right now?
If you do it now, you can amend your soil. You could bury leaves, you could bury horse manure, you could bury compost, you could sprinkle a little bit of 10-10-10 if your soil fertility comes back to be zilch. So it will overwinter.
Hmm.
It's really tough to put things in the ground in the springtime because you want to put seeds in the ground. So now is the best time, I think, to start amending your soil and getting it ready to grow stuff.
Right, great. And then there was another question. Can you use Milorganite in the fall when you plant the garlic?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know what's in that stuff, and I'm not so sure I would trust it knowing where it came from. There might be some heavy metals in it, and I'm not sure about that.
Okay. All right. Where can people get the soil test kit that you mentioned?
Well, this is a trick. Now, because my wallet has a chain and a bullet on it, and I usually carry a knife in my pocket, you got to go to the Waukesha County Courthouse, and you got to strip all the metal, including your belt, off before you walk in. Ask me how I know. So anyway, when you get into the courthouse, metal-less, you make a left turn, go down the stairs into the basement, keep going left, because if you are on the outside of the courthouse, the extreme eastern section in the basement is where the extension center is, but you can't get in that door. We used to be able to, but we can't do it anymore. So you got to go in the main entrance, through metal detection and go down the basement. You can use the elevator too. Ask the guard where to go. I don't think they'll be having people there to escort you there. They'll usually give you directions, but if you get downstairs, it's left, left, left. And finally, when you get to the extreme end of the lefts, you turn right, and it's the first office on the right. First office on the left after you turn right. I usually pick up a couple of the envelopes because I don't want to go through that stuff again. They give you the free envelopes to do the dirt analysis, and the directions are right on the envelope. So it's a very cut and dried process, but since I do it every 2 years, I always get 2 or 3 of those envelopes. If they ask you, well, how many people are you testing for? I'll say I'm testing for several of my neighbors. I'll lie like, just so I can get a few things without having to go through that courthouse thing again.
So you said that the envelopes are free. Do you have to send in money when you send in your dirt, or is it just a free service?
If I remember correctly, I think you have to send a check in the envelope. I'd have to go downstairs and go get one. Should I go get one? I can show you guys. 30 seconds.
Okay. All right. Let's see. I'm looking to see if there are any questions that you can answer, Carolyn. Carolyn, can you eat the garlic right after you harvest, or do you have to let it dry?
I actually eat it right after I harvest it. You can, yes. You can. Yeah, I tease my husband. I say it's like eating an apple. It's like, naturally it's very pungent, but it's very crispy and good. Yeah. Yeah. And I just believe that, eating things raw from the garden is so good for our bodies.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a picture of the bag.
Oh, all right, there we go. Okay, can you all see that? A picture of the bag.
Okay.
And here's the instructions. They'll give you both.
All right. Okay, a couple other questions here. Are there any companion crops you would recommend to interplant with the garlic in the spring?
Absolutely not. It does not like things growing amidst it. It is its own plant. It likes its own dirt. If you start growing beans on the exterior perimeter, those beans are going to grow tall and maybe invade with their foliage on top of the garlic foliage. I have not trying to companion plant them, but I know that they do not like competition, period. Anytime I've come close to having competition, I get small dinky bulbs.
Okay. That's super good to know. What about growing garlic in raised beds?
I have a bias against raised beds, and it has to do with watering. In Waukesha County, we have a lot of limestone in our area. And so when you water something, you're actually putting a higher pH than neutral water onto your soil. So if your plants need a neutral pH, why would you put pH water 10 on them? So I prefer rainstorms. I keep buckets all around the garden, and I gather rainwater. And rainwater is really the best. Now, you don't go out and buy distilled water. That's just goofy. But if you put a couple of barrels out, or take a downspout from a metal roof, that's okay to use that stuff. But don't take water from a shingle roof, because shingles can give you a little bit of extra tar components, and that's not good. Best water is rainwater if you can collect it off a metal roof. If you can't, that mulching really is great for not having to water. If you have to water, then okay, you got to water. You use the water you got. My well is only down 80 feet, and I've tested the water, and it is lime prevalent. It's about a pH of 8. So I don't really care to use it very much. It's also got a lot of iron in it. That's not bad for the garden, but it doesn't harm it as much as a higher pH does. So if you have to water a lot, keep in mind that you're putting higher pH than you need into your dirt.
Is there a procedure to grow garlic inside your house, inside?
No,
No.
none I know would be effective. You can try it, but I don't think you're going to get a big enough pot of dirt. If you wanted to try it, I would put 1 clove in a 2-gallon container. When you plant the garlic in your ground outside, this is amazing. I've dug my garlic up, and even though it's separated that far apart, those roots just keep going like a tree below the ground. It's really kind of cool to watch. When you start digging them up and you see all these roots spreading around like a tree, they're not harming each other, but they're not competing so much with each other as supporting each other. It's sort of like they're shaking hands and saying, yeah, buddy, all right, we're going to get good here.
Okay. All right. So how do you keep critters, squirrels, chipmunks from digging in the garden?
Well, there are a number of solutions to that. A dog is a real great way to prevent critters in your garden. A cat is another good way of keeping critters in your garden. Live traps are also very helpful. But if you live trap critters, there are ways to deal with critters that are live trapped. If you release those critters, you need to be at least a couple of miles away. I've trapped woodchucks, raccoons, squirrels, chipmunks. The least invasive I have found is squirrels. They're not interested in eating your plants. They're interested in digging up nuts. Chipmunks, I can share with chipmunks. Until they reach a certain point, then the live trap comes out. If you have, not voles, I know some people put in rat traps, the great big snap things that come over on them, but then you have to deal with the bodies. And if you have an empty place in the yard that's nice and open, the vultures will come and they'll take care of them for you. Crows will also. So I prefer to live trap them, but I won't tell you what I do with them after I live trap them.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you there. Okay, that's another topic that I won't host. Okay, so if you mentioned before, and Dave also just mentioned this, if you cover the soil or your mulch with chicken wire, does that also help keep critters from digging it up?
My garden perimeter has chicken wire buried 2 inches deep all around the perimeter. But this year, a woodchuck nosed right underneath all of that. He is no longer with us. He doesn't bother me anymore. So that was a problem that was solved. But in the meantime, it took a while to live trap him. And in the meantime, he ate pretty much all of my broccoli leaves and cauliflower leaves, most of my carrot tops. So I got a diminished carrot harvest. Fortunately, the broccoli harvest was mostly done. So I shared some things with him. And by the way, woodchucks are very good to eat.
Okay.
Seriously, they are.
Okay, Rich, here's another question for you. We have a participant this evening who lives in Houston, Texas. Do you think that your way of planting garlic and the garlic you suggested is relevant to that participant in Houston?
No, I think there's way too much sand down there. If you did grow in Texas, I would definitely amend the soil tremendously. And that goes to, let's say you have a 10-foot by 10-foot area that you want to amend the soil in Texas. I would get about 40 cubic feet of manure of some type and bury that with a rototiller, as well as humus, compost, and all kinds of other stuff. I know that Texas soil also has a lot of clay in it. So clay is not bad. Clay actually holds moisture, but sand percolates right through. And garlic needs moisture. So if you have water percolating right through the sand, it's not supplying the moisture the garlic needs. So if you're growing garlic in Texas, you definitely got to amend the soil with something that holds that moisture.
Okay. Right. And then one more question about the soil test. When you test soil, are you testing from one particular spot, or are you grabbing soil from different areas in your garden?
In my 50 by 50 foot area, I walk around and I take about a cupful of soil from 10 different areas around the garden, anywhere, just here, there, everywhere, everywhere. I throw it into a 5-gallon bucket, and I put a stick in there, and I just mix the stuff up, tremendously mix it up, mix, mix. Then, after it's all mixed together, take the stones out, take the leaf pieces out, deposit them elsewhere. You just want the dirt. Take 2 cups of the dirt and put them in here.
Okay.
And you deal with the rest of it.
Okay. So I think that I got through most of the questions on here. If I did not, feel free to unmute yourself right now and ask Rich your question. Sorry, I'm just going through all this. If I missed somebody's question, I really apologize.
I see a cat thing that says 26.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions in here. There's also a lot of good information on new places to purchase garlic. So I'll just go over just a couple of that. Let's see, River Valley Ranch, if anyone has been there, they're a little south of Burlington. They offer their own variety named Harmony, which is a relative of music that people have had great luck with. And there's a new seller on Highway I in McWanago where somebody just bought several varieties. Connie said that there's no garlic left at Copper Kettle right now.
I wonder why.
Yeah, but Ebert's Greenhouse Village, west of Oconomowoc, has 10 varieties left. So,
Good to know.
yeah, that's great to know. So there's still lots of places to get garlic if anyone is on their way to go get it now. And then a couple people mentioned to me before this that farmers markets are also places that you know, you can get garlic from to plant. So,
I would ask the question, have you sprayed this garlic with anything? If we're interested in doing things organically with less chemical exposure, I would just ask, and hopefully the truth would be, you know, put forward, whether or not these are not pure, but at least less, have less toxins put onto them.
okay. And then, let's see. And then Matt wanted to know, what is the one thing you're testing for? If you're testing your soil for one thing, what is that one thing that's most important?
Well, I would guess if you look at your test reports, I didn't grab one and bring it up, but the Extension Center usually lets you know if you're deficient in phosphorus, potash, nitrogen, and they'll give you pH. Now, if you pay them more, they will give you more in-depth information on what you have in your soil, and you can select what you're testing for. There are micro ingredients also that your soil might be deficient in. If you're doing this for the very first time, then I think that's a good deal. But afterwards, after you start to amend your soil and build the fertility up, you don't really have to worry too much except for pH.
Are there other problems that you see with garlic? Is there disease or insect issues?
I've read that the allium family, onions and garlic, etc., can get some diseases and things. I've not experienced that. I don't use any poisons in the garden. I encourage hornets. I encourage all kinds of bugs. I don't poison anything, and I let them fight it all out. And so far, I've been very lucky not to get any insect predation or viruses or molds or anything like that. I think the application of leaves has something to do with that, because that encourages critters below the leaves. I encourage snakes, I encourage toads, I encourage slugs, because that's food. You know, there's a food chain going on out there, and we're at the top of this vegetable food chain.
So then, is it necessary to rotate garlic into different beds, or can you plant it the same place every year?
It's definitely a good idea to rotate, no matter what you're planting in your garden. I've got this counterclockwise thing going on. So beans here this year, beans over there next year. So it's going around, and sometimes it's 180 degrees, oftentimes off and on. Some of your plants are really heavy fertility consumers. Peppers are very fertility dependent. Brussels sprouts suck Brussels sprouts take it way the heck out of the soil. And so mixing your soil community up as you rotate things around is a very, very important kind of thing. Best thing you can put in is compost. And the leaves, as it rots out, they tend to put more of the nutrients. Again, you know, the cycle of life. We all have this cycle going on. So that cycle goes back into the dirt.
And then, is there an ideal crop to plant after you harvest a bed of garlic?
Well, I've read a little bit about putting, what's that one, Carolyn? I'm too old to remember all these names, but it's the little tiny flowering thing that you got to cut the flowers off right away. Wolken, where are you? Help me out with this one.
Oh, you mean cover crop?
Yeah, cover crop, some sort of buckwheat. That's it, buckwheat. Buckwheat helps, but man, you better cut that sucker down before it produces seed. Otherwise, you're going to have a buckwheat field. I don't want to take anything like rye or oats, nothing like that, because you're going to get seeds out of that no matter what. Grass is the worst enemy of anybody's garden, unless you want to have a wildflower garden. Grass is one of those things that's the toughest to get rid of. That's one I actually have to pull sometimes. And every time I pull it, I throw it out of the garden completely. I don't even want the roots in there. Once I pull it out, I'll throw a bunch of mulch leaves on top of it. Hopefully the roots will die out underneath things.
Awesome. All right, I think we have reached the end of the questions. So I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. And I want to thank Carolyn and Rich so much for all your work on this presentation and for spending the evening with us.
Well, been fun.
Yeah, thank you. Have fun growing your garlic. Next time we get together, tell us your experiences.
Yeah.